Hello, yes, and welcome to The Business. We always say it's a packed show, and it's always true, but this week our show is not only full to bursting, but on a very special subject indeed. For this week's show is focusing on internet marketing. That's making the most of your website, using social media effectively, and all manner of things digital. Our special guest is Cheryl Luzet at Wagada, an expert on SEO amongst many other things. We've also been to Social Media Week in London and picked up some great advice. Richard Roaf, a consultant at Alter Eco Communications, explains why novices should approach social media without any fear whatsoever. Brendan Quinn uses social media during events he organises. How would he advise others to do it? Laura Pedley tells how charities can effectively use social media on very small budgets. And Sarah Coften talks about the challenge of trying to get potential customers to click on ads. Last month, though, as I said, we visited Social Media Week, a week full of lectures, seminars, debates and masterclasses. The topics covered everything from getting a job via social, dealing with a social media PR crisis, to things like crowdfunding and using all the social networks effectively. But first of all, I've got Vicky Scott, Clare McAnulty and Roma Bhowmick in the studio. Good evening.
Good evening, Trevor.
Hi, what are your experiences of this kind of sort of internet marketing sort of area? Vicky, what about you?
Well, I think there's no doubt about the fact that it is one of the key elements of the future of marketing. I think there is a worry in people's minds that it's going to be the one and only thing and that they're not on top of it. And that's not true. It's just another channel, it's another angle, it's another opportunity. And in many instances, it's a very cheap opportunity to go to a wide variety of people. I mean, at the seminar that a few of us went to in London at the conference, it was absolutely heaving. It was all over London. It was international as well. And there was every different type of person, type of business, type of specialist that you could imagine there. It was almost like a sort of crowdsource, wasn't it, Claire? Lots of people very, very interested. And I think it's really important that everybody tries to sort of keep up. You don't have to be ahead of the game. Let somebody else be ahead of the game. But just keeping up and keeping abreast, as we're trying to do, I think is really quite important to big and small businesses alike. What did you think, Claire?
Yeah, I enjoyed lots of aspects of it. I think as well, one of the things that you don't expect to get there so much is networking. It's quite a good opportunity to do quite a lot of networking, because really what you've got there is lots and lots of different businesses of different sizes, lots of charities, lots of sole traders and larger businesses. So the networking aspect of it was very good. In general, my own personal thought was a lot of the talks were geared towards the larger businesses. That's the only thing I would say about it. That said, every time I went to something, I learned something, so it's always worth it when that happens.
Well, I didn't get to Social Media Week. However, what I find interesting is that they looked at crowdfunding, because I've actually worked with a couple of businesses recently who aren't large businesses, small businesses, who were looking to go to the next stage of growth, and they used crowdfunding to assist that. One was in the creative industry sector, one was in design, and actually crowdfunding worked for them. It was a very interesting concept.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, as I said, we've got a show on for the whole of the show. It's a sort of special thing. And our first guest is going to be Cheryl Luzet from Wagada. And she'll be on just after these announcements.
Hi, this is Danny Smith. Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Hart's Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondence covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Hart's Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
Thinking of selling your car? Wondering how much it's worth? Want instant payment? Visit theCarBuyingShop.com. Because with the Car Buying Shop, we're that confident in our prices that we'll even come to you. So, to arrange a home visit or to get a quote, visit theCarBuyingShop.com. The Car Buying Shop, available 7 days a week. That's theCarBuyingShop.com.
Hi, this is Daryl. Can I invite you to join me for something different on your radio this coming Saturday? As well as the Andy Hour, we've got City Cultures, Community Life, Retro Radio, everything 80s, nothing but 90s, and so much more. Join me this coming Saturday between 1 and 4 on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Yes, welcome back to The Business. It's all manner of things like internet marketing, social media, making the most of your website and so on, a special edition. And we've now got our main interview slot. Vicky, over to you.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Trevor. And I'm delighted to reintroduce Cheryl Luzet of Wagada. Cheryl's been with us before, probably about a year ago, was it?
Maybe slightly less than that, I think.
Slightly less
a few
than
months
that.
ago, maybe.
And Cheryl's one of the West Herts experts in SEO. So we're really, really pleased that you're able to come back and talk all things digital with us, and particularly SEO. What I first wanted to do was to just say to anybody who's listening that if you've got a specific question, or if you've got some sort of point to make, or you've got something that is bugging you, or you've just learned and you think everybody else ought to share, do get in touch with us. You can call us on 01727 839 926. You can tweet us on @RVTheBusiness, or email us thebusiness@radioverulam.com. We'd love to hear from you. Hints, tips, moans, groans, or just straightforward questions. So, Cheryl, first of all, for those who didn't come across you last time you were on the show, just tell us a little bit about Wagada and what it is you do.
Okay, sure. Well, I help companies to make their websites more successful. So I help people who want to generate more traffic to their websites. So I use ethical search engine optimization, which means that I help sort of raise people's profile online, sort of promote engagement for people's products and services, and really just kind of boost their brand as well as their relevancy, because a lot of search engine optimization is about showing Google how relevant you are to a particular search term. But I also help people to also boost their conversions online, so get more sales through their website. And also I do content marketing, so I help people to get more engagement on their site for their products and sort of get their customers involved.
Now, it all sounds, when you say it like that, terribly straightforward and very, very easy. But there's a sort of like big feeling out there that it's a bit of a dark art. And you just used a very interesting word there, ethical SEO. What's the difference between ethical and non-ethical SEO?
Well, you can either choose to work with Google and obey Google's rules on how you can go about promoting a website, or you can kind of try and trick Google into thinking that the website is more authoritative than it actually is. And over the past few years, Google has brought in sort of more and more algorithm changes that actually makes it much more difficult to trick Google. And it will actually penalise companies now that are trying to trick Google. So it can be a very, very dangerous game. And I do get quite often, clients coming to me saying that they've used previous SEO companies and, for a couple of years it worked and they were really happy. And then Google made an algorithm change and discovered that in fact they were doing sort of dodgy things, and now they've gone from page 1 to page 100. So you have to be quite careful in this day and age, sort of, who you use and what sort of techniques you're using.
I mean, that's very interesting to me, because I've come across a couple of sort of horror stories where large organisations, often London-based, using quite heavy telesales techniques, have actually got clients to sign up to their version of search engine optimization. And when we've looked at it in a bit more detail, and they've said, they're going to create 100 links or something like that. Yeah. When we've looked at it in a little more detail, it's mostly nonsense. They have done what they've said they do, created 100 inbound links, but the inbound links are nonsense. They're nothing. They're not relevant. They're not appropriate. They're of no real value to the business. So when you've got your business, you recognise that your website is in good shape, and now you want it to work harder in terms of the organic search, which is, I think, the term that's used for Google naturally moving you up the ranks. Yeah. What are the sorts of questions that you should be asking somebody as an SEO specialist to make sure that they're not sort of going to con you, that they're not trying to do unethical or even close to the edge work on your website that might in the long term damage you? What are the questions that you ought to be asking?
Well, that's a really interesting question, actually. That I've found that there are kind of two types of dodgy SEO agency. So there are the ones that charge you a lot of money and do absolutely nothing, which is actually a better option than the second option.
God,
which
that
is
sounds
ones
awful.
who charge you a lot of money and actually, like you say, produce a whole load of low-quality links. Now, having a whole lot of low-quality links can actually damage your website these days, so you do have to be quite careful. So the sort of things that you should be asking are how they're going to go about link building, what are their ideas for link building, and if they are a little bit coy about it and a bit like, oh, we'll deal with that, or don't worry about that, or they talk about directories, or low quality sort of link networks, or producing their own websites when they're putting on these links, then you should have sort of feel alarm bells ringing. If they talk about ideas for promoting the company, for engaging your audience, for it might be doing competitions, it might be collaborating with other companies, it might be doing some guest blogging. It might be sort of producing high quality content that is really interesting that people sort of will want to link to. Sort of ideas like that not only boost your search engine ranking but also promote your company and your website as well. Those are the sorts of things that you want your SEO agency to be doing right now. Anything else could be dangerous, really.
So you used a word earlier as well, which was relevancy.
Yes.
And a lot of those things that you were just saying sort of related back to the sort of concept of relevancy and valuable content that actually is really what your business is all about, as opposed to sort of trying to pretend that you're relevant when actually you're not. Yeah. Well, that's interesting, but is it possible for people to just do this themselves? Is it something that you can just sort of get cracking with and not have to employ experts to do?
Well, in some ways, there are many things you can do yourselves. You can go on to the Google AdWords keyword tool. You can do a little bit of keyword research. You can find some phrases to write blog articles around and try and drive traffic into your site like that. There's lots of things you can do to promote your site, but trying to actively do search engine optimization yourself, I think, could be a little bit dangerous because you may end up doing things by accident that could get you penalised.
Right.
For example, one thing that can work quite well is when you link into your website from external websites. If you write a guest blog or something like that, it can be quite effective to use the sort of keywords in the anchor text, so in the actual linking text that someone clicks on. But if you do that too much, then you could get penalised. So there are sort of little things you have to be careful of. I think the ideal scenario for a company really is to sort of find an agency who is happy to sort of work together and work in tandem, so they can kind of advise you on what to do, and then you can go away and do it, and that's how you can really get the best value for money.
And is there a point in the process where it's advisable to start or to continue? I mean, I've been working with some clients in North London, and they've clearly, their ears have been bent by some SEO people that they know, who have been saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other. At the moment, their website is a complete shambles. The branding is all over the place. The shop doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I've basically said to them, you need to get that in place before you start driving traffic. It's a bit like having a shop that's got no stock or a till that doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many people come to it. If they can't buy, or you're potentially going to do damage to the brand, then it's not the right time for them to be spending that money. Having said that, if you're setting up a business, to get somebody that knows what they're doing in very early on would seem to make sense.
Yes, you're right on both counts. That if someone comes to me to do SEO for a website that I don't think is branded correctly or is working correctly, then I will usually turn it down, because I don't see the point in bringing visitors to a website that you're not going to get those conversions at the end of the day. Because for me, that's what it's all about. It's about whether they're making money, not about just ranking at the end of the day. But at the same time, SEO does take a little bit of time to work. So if someone is already in the process of sorting their website out, it's a good idea to start early on with the SEO, just so you can, when the website is actually ready, that you can be there, on the front page, waiting for the customers to arrive.
And how do you price it? How do you price what you do? How do you, and how does then a client understand whether it's good value to get an expert like yourself in?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to try and work out if it's good value, because you never really know the effect it's going to have. And you never really know before you start working with a site what the sort of market, what the possible market is that's out there, because, you know, there's a big difference between being at number 3 on Google and being at number 8 on Google to the amount of traffic you're going to get. So until you start work, you don't really know how long it's going to take to get you to that point that you need to be. And I do know there's a lot of agencies that do charge quite a lot of money. So I think it's very difficult to someone to judge if they are getting value for money. But what I always say to people is try and ask what their hourly rate is and see if you actually think that is reasonable for anyone to be earning that as an hourly rate, and try and work it out like that. I usually start off with kind of a startup price to kind of get the website set up, and then and work with the client monthly to keep sort of boosting engagement and boosting the profile on a monthly basis.
And it's interesting that you say that it's the end game that's more important.
Yeah.
You know, everybody sort of says, I want to be number 1 on, or I want to be on page 1 of Google. But actually, for what? You know, what you really potentially are wanting is, you know, to turn customers into to turn viewers into customers in some shape or form, and that, you know, being on page 1 might not always be for one particular phrase, might not be the phrase that is likely to lead to custom. So how do you figure out what those phrases would be? I know you mentioned Google AdWords and keyword searches can help, but is it trial and error? Is that why it takes a while?
In some ways, it's trial and error. I think it's important when you're choosing your keywords to obviously select the ones that you consider to be the obvious keywords that all the other sort of companies are going to be trying for. But what can be really, really effective is to go for what we call the long tail keyword searches. So these are the ones that are much more specific. They're much less competitive to rank for. They probably have a lot less searches, but because they're so specific that actually if you bring traffic in through those keywords, you're actually much likely to get that sale. So, for example, I've got a client who sells dresses. If we try and rank for dresses, it's obviously quite competitive. It's quite difficult to get up there. And also, if someone finds your site, they might not like your dress that you're offering. But if you try and rank for the phrase red flowery dress, and you sell red flowery dresses, then you've got that sale pretty much when someone finds your page. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
It sounds a bit silly to say that, but you know, people do get sort of quite frightened by all of these sort of very clever terms and technical phrases. But when you put it like that, it does make sense. I think Trevor's got a question here.
Yeah, it's a sort of question. I suppose it's a recurring thing that we often ask, I guess, about sort of quality versus quantity. In search engine optimization. Of course, do you get clients who are just basically saying, get me to the top of the search engines at any cost, and you're actually having to say, well, there's no good doing that, promising things that you can't actually deliver. So it's about the quality and so on. I mean, you've alluded to the fact that you might turn down business in certain circumstances, but do you get that very often?
Not really, actually. That's quite interesting. If someone did approach me and said, just get me there and do whatever you need to, then I probably wouldn't, I certainly wouldn't take that client on.
Right.
Because in this day and age, it's very easy to get a website damaged, and that's the last thing you'd ever want, to cause. So definitely, I certainly wouldn't take a client on that just wanted to get there at any cost. I think probably they wouldn't choose someone like me. They'd probably choose sort of more of a mass market SEO company rather than a specialist, I think.
Yeah, because there's quite a reputational issue at stake there,
yes,
isn't there?
Definitely.
Okay.
I don't think people realise quite how much damage they could potentially do. It's quite
it is quite frightening. As I have people that come to me and they say that they've got all these links that this old SEO agency has created for them, and I do try and help them, but you have to remove those links first, and these links are on sort of dodgy websites that aren't maintained, and you're trying to get a link removed from a website, and these days there's quite a business in kind of link removal. You have to kind of pay people to remove the link from their websites, and they're making quite a lot of money out of it. So
another thing to worry
about.
So we've talked about links and the importance of links, and we've talked about blogs and having rich text in blogs that can help you with your traffic. How does social networking fit into this? How does it work in terms of trying to help drive traffic to websites and customers to websites?
Well, social media is a brilliant brilliant way to kind of reach out to a large number of people. So one thing that Google is looking at the moment very much is engagement and audience engagement. So using social media, you can demonstrate to Google that people are engaged with the content that you're offering on your site, with your products or services. You know, it can see if people are chatting with you on Twitter, if they're following you on Twitter, if they're retweeting you. You can see if your Facebook page is well used, if people are, talking to each other on it. So that's kind of one of the most important things from an SEO perspective is promoting engagements and showing to Google that your website has authority because you have an audience who are following you.
And the same applies to LinkedIn as well. Quite often when you search something, one of the first things that seems to come up is LinkedIn in the business environment.
Yeah, definitely.
So they're all additional opportunities to get your message across, to get people pointing in the direction of your website. Have you had any really sort of shocking experiences where things have gone wrong because people have just done it badly?
Social media.
Well, in the whole of that sort of internet marketing arena.
Okay. Well, my only real sort of shocking experiences has been sort of people who've used, other SEO agencies and spent quite a lot of money on it. I mean, I had a potential client that came to me this week who wanted me to sort of check out what his SEO agency has been doing, and he's been paying them £400 a month for the past 18 months. And I can go in and see what links they've generated and what they've been doing, and they have been sending him reports every month showing where they're ranking. And when I sort of checked their ranking against my ranking tools, it was actually complete nonsense. They claimed that they were on page 1 for this, that and the other, and in fact they weren't even on, they weren't ranking at all for any of these phrases, and that they'd also made up the search traffic. They'd said a certain amount of search traffic was arriving at the site, and it had grown since they took the business on, and when I looked at it, it had actually gone down considerably, sort of 80% since they took it on.
Goodness
so it's
me.
Absolutely shocking.
I mean, that
really.
sort of analytics you can see relatively straightforwardly on Google Analytics, can't you?
Exactly,
so even if you just know what you're doing, that I've found that clients really like that analytics tool because they can see sort of what's happening and realise that person actually came onto their site from South America.
Yes.
It's terribly exciting. Gosh, that really is bad news.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with you?
They can contact me through my website, which is www.wagada.co.uk.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. Cheryl's going to join us for the rest of the show. As Trevor said earlier, we've got a slightly different format this week because we've been at the social media event down in London. We've got lots of hints and tips and ideas and thoughts from some of the people that we met down in London. And Cheryl's going to stay with us and be the expert on our random panel this week. So thanks ever so much, Cheryl. Great to have you here. Great to have a bit more expert knowledge on the panel. And I think we've got a couple of bits and pieces before we move on to the first clip.
That's right. Well, we're going to have a quick break to start with, but just to say to you again, we love to get your tweets and so on. If you've got any views yourself, then of course it's at RV the Business, at RV the Business. So do get in touch with us, and we'll be back right after this.
The Solid Gold Music Show on Radio Verulam is with you on Saturday mornings between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Join Derek Staines and Stephen Hall as they flash you back, value discs, have a brief biog and interview the stars. We also allow SJH to ramble down nostalgia lane. It's all on the Premier Oldies show here on 92.6 FM. The Solid Gold Music Show, sponsored by Dockguard of Luton.
Who guarantees you rent 52 weeks a year? Guarantees you rent when the property is vacant. Guarantees you rent when the tenants fail to pay. Guarantees you a contract start date with no risk, no insurance policies and no set-up fees. Northwood are the letting agents who guarantee rental income 52 weeks a year. Call St Albans 734 550. Northwood, St Albans 734 550. T's and C's apply.
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
So I think we're all convinced that having a good website is not about complexity. It's very much more about having one that's strategically lined up to attracting the right customers. And we know the importance of regular and relevant content creation and the value of having all the social networking elements linked and pointing in the right direction. Now let's hear from a variety of experts on specific aspects of getting cracking with all these elements. As Trevor mentioned, earlier in the month, some of the team were in London at the Social Media Week and met up with a number of interesting professionals from the field of social marketing. The first of which was Richard Roaf.
So I produce digital content largely for charities and non-profits. So I focus on producing YouTube videos that will help showcase a campaign issue or to promote an organisation or to impress a grant funding body. But I also have made Facebook content for people like Greenpeace and have done some social media strategy work. So a lot of it is around campaigning or otherwise promoting charities.
And you clearly are very involved in the world of social media in terms of your clients. I mean, is that how you use it yourself in terms of marketing your own business?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing the work that I do, I use social media in a professional and a personal capacity to promote the company. A lot of my effort goes into promoting the videos that I've made on Facebook through my social networks, which often overlap with the organisations that I want to work for. But I'm increasingly trying to focus on Twitter, because I think the types of conversations that are taking place and types of content that's shared is often more professional. So yeah, Facebook and Twitter are my main aims. And then also because I produce a lot of YouTube videos, through branding those with my company, the organisations promoting their own campaign using my video will be also promoting me at the same time, so some business comes in through that.
Right. And you know, there are people out there with various degrees of knowledge about social media. Some are sort of enthusiastic but don't really feel comfortable or confident they know it was doing good things for their business. Are there any particular, for the sort of the novice who is starting to use social media in their business, what should they be thinking about? I mean, there's a widespread feeling that a lot of people feel bewildered about the array of channels that could be used. I mean, is there any sort of simple, generic advice you'd pass on to clients using it for the first time?
Yeah, so I think that, well, the first bit of advice would be don't be scared by it. I mean, generally, all the main social media platforms are designed to be user-friendly and don't require any technical expertise. Secondly, define very clearly what you're hoping to get out from it. So with the focus on Facebook page likes and Twitter followers and YouTube views, instinctively a lot of people think that defines success, whereas actually you can use Facebook for a very small audience, but you can have the 50 right people that you want to talk to looking at your information, and that could be success for you. So really be clear about who you're trying to reach and in what way you're engaging them. And then thirdly, it would be leave the business speak and the jargon to one side and focus more on the personal side or the story of what you're doing. So social media is about making connections, and people don't want to connect with a product, they want to connect with other people or a story or a set of values. And so really try and find a narrative that you can use to present your organisation and what you do that's more than business-based jargon.
So although the technology is changing and evolving, is it fair to say that a lot of the so-called traditional rules of marketing apply? It's about kind of common sense, about, you know, people buy people and people buy ideas, and actually what we're talking about here is the channels and means through which you do it. So not to be scared, and a lot of the same rules apply, albeit in a slightly different format.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think that sometimes people see social media as something that's very separate from your other marketing activities or from other parts of your business, whereas really it should be integrated into it. So just as you may see someone at an event and follow up with a phone call, just a part of that process would be following them on Twitter or LinkedIn or inviting them to join your Facebook group. So really it should be seen as a continuation of other marketing activities.
Okay, Richard from Alter Eco Communications, thank you very much.
So, some interesting tips and hints there from Richard. I think the key messages that came out of that clip were, number one, don't be scared. Number two, define clearly what you hope to get out of engaging with social media. And number three, leave the business speak and jargon to one side and focus on the story. And he talked about finding a narrative about what your business does as opposed to just tweeting out, this is who I am, this is what I do, get in touch. So what were the thoughts from the rest of you guys from that little interview there with Richard?
I thought it was interesting how he talked about that really on social media you're engaging with a person, you're not just engaging with a company, and I think that's really, really important, that to show that you're a human when you're talking through social media. And even though it's important to keep it quite professional, to kind of, you know, tell a little bit about your day or something about what you've been doing, something a bit more personal. It's quite nice to get a bit of interaction going with the people that are following you.
Vicky?
Yes, I think that there's it is all about engagement as opposed to telling or selling or just blasting stuff out. But it drives me nuts when I have to read people sort of saying, "Oh, I'm just off to the pub," or "What a lovely day it is today." It's just so boring, I'm afraid. I'm not really interested. I'm not even interested if it's Richard Branson or Stephen Fry. So I'm hardly likely to be interested if it's sort of Fred Blogs around the corner. So I think, I mean, I might be a bit extreme on that front, but I think it's really important to have a plan, to know what it is you're trying to achieve, to have really useful information, to have fun information, to make it entertaining as well as engaging, and make sure that it's about sort of two-way conversation if possible. But just cut out the drivel. You can make it personal and fun without it being rubbish.
I suppose it's easy to, because we take social media, a lot of people are very frightened of it, aren't they, as Richard was saying, and so on. But actually, it's not rocket science. A lot of the rules are the same, aren't they, I guess? What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that Richard specialised in, which obviously is dear to my heart, is video. So Richard uses video very, very well, and it's a very good way to get across quite a lot of information, particularly when the information can be quite complicated. Video is quite a good way of doing it rather than being too wordy, because bear in mind you have only got so many characters on Twitter, so a lot easier to maybe put all your information on a video and just provide a link, say on your Twitter, to your video, which then has a lot more content.
Yeah, I mean, I see all these surveys that say people notice more what they see than what they read. I mean, is that your experience at all, that people would tend to relate more to the sort of visual images rather than the written word?
I think people are different, so some people prefer to listen, some people prefer to watch, some people prefer to read text. So really you want to cater for everyone, really. You want to provide a little bit of everything for everyone.
Right.
I think it also depends to a certain extent on what it is that you've got. I mean, if you can more visually and easily explain, as Claire said, something in on film, then why not do it? Trying to plough through a whole book of information and instructions on how to do something. We've only got to look at IKEA, and if it all came in a book and just words as opposed to pictures, then nobody's shelves would ever get up, would they? Or nobody's beds would ever get made.
Well, my shelves still don't get put up. I mean, of course, we need to put a good word in for audio, of course, because that is a near perfect form of form of communication. Now, we're talking obviously about sort of social media, it being Social Media Week, but just how practical is social media? Does it really help you find customers and make your marketing work harder for you? We met a chap called Brendan Quinn. We asked him how he uses social media before, during and after events he organises, and how, in particular, would he advise others to do so as well?
One of the best tips I give people using social media is just to use it as an additional tool, not just to see it as something being separate, but as part of our whole marketing package. And when I say that, for example, if I'm at an event which is using Twitter, then I actively take part on discussions and so forth, and tweet about the event, maybe even tweeting beforehand, having a look at the hashtag for the event before, if there's a hashtag. Sometimes I may even make communication with the speakers beforehand and say, do you want to catch up for coffee? Looking at who's actually in the room, using hashtags as well. So have a look and see if the event's got a hashtag, Also make sure that you can easily be recognised. So have a look at what icon you're using for your profile on Twitter. So if you're going to an event and it's an icon of a image, not a facial image, but let's say a logo, it may be obviously much harder to recognise. But if you've got you're using your face as a brand, then it's going to be a lot easier to recognise when you're actually in the room and when you're tweeting.
And I can see how it's great in terms of networking, interactivity with your sort of fellow participants, and brings the whole sort of subject alive. I mean, in terms of bringing you closer to your buyers, people who might be buying stuff from you, what do you do in that area? I mean, how do you sort of reach out to people who might one day become your customers?
Yeah, sure. Well, quite frankly, property is a huge area anyway, so that I don't think it's always wise just to be necessarily selective, because the people who may one day be interested in property at the moment may not be interested in property, so that's one factor to consider. But doing some simple things, so making it easy for people to reach you. So how are you using social media? Are you using it actively on your business card? For example, do you have a Twitter address which people can connect with you? So that's some simple ways. But the key thing is to make it simple and to choose what you like doing as well. Yes, it does have to be useful for business, but also, is it that important to create a blog or a microblog? So when we're talking about blog, and we're talking usually like long detailed blogs like WordPress, using WordPress platform. And if we're talking about microblogging, that's using platforms such as Twitter or Tumblr. And that's where Twitter becomes so useful. Some people are fantastically skilled at writing long detailed, and you may not be really that engaged in writing long pieces, but you may prefer to use shorter. So that's where Twitter becomes so much more handy. And frankly, what you can do in terms of Twitter is looking at who is using Twitter well and listen to the experts and learning as much as you can. And Twitter changes, and it has changed since it was first developed as well.
And I mean, being here at Social Media Week, I mean, I'm sort of now finding it sort of personally sort of difficult to imagine a world, without social media in terms of doing business. I mean, how would you be able to operate your business if it wasn't for social media? Is it central to what you do now?
Yeah, that's a really good point about the role Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and other platforms. And I would say it certainly is a core part of a business, particularly if it's a small business which is relatively new or in its early years, or the budget's not as huge as some multi-million pound companies. So it's well worth looking at what you have available to you. And with social media, smaller businesses are a huge advantage over bigger businesses, because bigger businesses, it takes months sometimes to create a corporate strategy, whereas if you're a smaller business, you don't have to go through that lengthy situation. So realizing that you're actually at the early stages of social media, realizing although you may not have the budget to compete with larger companies in terms of using social media, it's not always the budget which is the most useful thing, and sometimes the learning is more important.
Great. So again, some interesting tips and hints there. And what I found particularly interesting as a strategist was this concept of social media as part and parcel of your marketing strategy, not as something that's separate. Great messages around the fact that it's a low budget, low cost way of advertising. And this whole context around tweeting at events, using hashtags for the event itself, using what he called a microblog, all of these things quite valuable in the context of the fact that that event itself is going to have a huge number of followers. So again, it's your opportunity to pick up even more potential followers and customers. Claire, what did you think?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. At a lot of the events, when you're sitting out in the audience, almost everybody had a phone or a little laptop, and they were encouraged to use them. So the people speaking from the stage or the podium would say, that's fine, keep them all out. Whereas maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago, it would be quite rude, wouldn't it? If somebody was giving a talk, they would want everybody's attention, everybody to be listening and looking at them. But they were encouraging people to say, use the hashtag, keep your laptops out, keep your phones out. So it was quite strange. But he's absolutely right about that, but also about using the avatar well. So make sure you use your own picture in the avatar so that people can possibly spot you in the hall or wherever the conference is taking place.
Cheryl, what about this concept of microblogging?
I think it's really interesting. Either people enjoy writing long blogs or they enjoy microblogging. It's really brilliant that when you're using Twitter, that you can just write something very, very quickly. Writing a blog article can take such a long time. And you don't always have time, So if you're at an event, you can quickly say what you need to say and just get out a very short message. And it's just great that we can communicate and sort of share information in such a quick format.
Yeah, Vicky, you made the point you hate reading reams of useless information.
It wasn't so much reams of useless information. It was the microblog useless information. The I'm off to the pub, or it's the sun's shining, or something like that. But I think what Cheryl just said is very interesting, because I think there's a famous quote. I think it's Mark Twain that said apologised for the length of a letter once by saying that he didn't have time to write a short one. And I think that's it's sort of quite an interesting concept. But also, with some of my clients, they sort of say, well, it's really, really difficult to get all that information in 140 characters or whatever it is. And the reality, of course, is that you don't have to do it in that number of characters. What you've got to do is get a key, like a headline, and then a link to something, so you can actually get whole heaps of info. You can link to videos, you can do all sorts of stuff in those microblogs very effectively.
It's amazing, isn't it, that you can actually pack quite a lot into 140 characters. I'm always half thinking, which grammatical rule am I breaking now? Which of the many grammatical rules am I breaking now? But certainly, I mean, this whole thing about, is it it used to be such a... I remember people frowning at me at conferences when I used to sort of do a hashtag or things like that. But that's actually great when you're in the audience and you realise there's lots of other people in the audience as well, particularly when you're sharing a joke about somebody who is speaking. Anyway, right, we're halfway through our sort of extracts from Social Media Week, and we'll be coming back to it just after this.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weston.
And I'm Lydia El Khoury.
Join us every Thursday evening on The Parent Show for expert interviews, local information about caring for children in West Harts,
and a What's On guide you just can't afford to miss. We're here every Thursday between 8 and 9 p.m. on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Don't forget to tune in!
Join Simon Carver on Fridays from 6:30 p.m. for The Film Guide. We look at the UK cinema box office top 10, a selection of the new cinema releases and the best of the week's films on free-to-air TV. That's Fridays from 6:30 p.m. on West Harts Drive Time with Danny Smith, exclusively on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Hello, I'm Billy Bramley.
And I'm Colin Cox.
And we're here to tell you about Apple Weekend taking place on the 19th and 20th of October at Alet Nurseries in St Albans.
With more than 10 varieties of apples on offer, they'll be pulping us.
Tasting us? Pulping us?
Yes, to make apple paper.
That's appalling. Apple-ing.
There'll be a selection of delicious apple chutneys and yummy cakes on sale, which you can try before you buy.
And the St Albans beekeepers will be offering info and advice on our much-loved bees.
I bet that will create a real buzz.
So don't miss Apple Weekend on the 19th and 20th of October.
From 10 till 4 both days at Alet Nurseries on the North Orbital Road, St Albans.
Colin, can we go scrumping now?
You can't eat one of your own, Billy.
Fancy a strawberry then?
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Oh, I did love that Alet Apple Weekend thing. Unfortunately, listeners, it was in September, so I'm very sorry about that. But I hope if you went, you had a very, very, very good time. It made us chuckle a little.
Too much cider, Trevor.
Absolutely. Right, on with the show. There's no doubt that social media, if used cleverly, can be effective, and there's no greater area where the need to make much out of very little is within the charity and social enterprise sectors. Now, our very own Clare McAnulty met up with Laura Pedley, a specialist in this area, with some very useful thoughts and comment. And this is what she said.
My name's Laura. I work for Cause 4, and we do fundraising and development strategy for charities.
What we're quite interested to find out is that charities, not-for-profits, tend to use social media very well just simply because they have to. What types of social media do you find are effective for your company?
So my company itself isn't actually a charity, but we work for charities. So we will advise on social media strategy. The main areas that most charities use are Facebook and Twitter because they're free. YouTube is also quite popular. The big areas are where charities can be creative because that's where a lot of their value lies. So a lot of charities, particularly the ones we work with a lot of arts organisations, so they have that artistic element within their staff and within their members. So they can create great pieces, videos, even just pictures, which can be used, which are just a little bit more interesting than just plain text.
And would you advise them of a particular thing that's more effective, do you think? Do you think that Facebook is more effective than a Twitter or more effective than a YouTube? Or do you encourage them to try out different channels?
I think it depends on who your audience is. So we have some organisations whose members are younger. Where the members are younger, you're looking more at Facebook and YouTube. Facebook and YouTube are still the two biggest social media forums. If you're looking at a slightly older demographic or a professional demographic, then Twitter is great for engaging. I found out on Monday at an event that the largest growing age group in Twitter is 55 and over.
Wow.
So you really can use Twitter to reach people that you wouldn't necessarily be able to reach from, say, YouTube. So if you're thinking of arts organisations, then you're looking more towards somewhere that you can use YouTube, for example, Vine videos. But I would always encourage linking them together. So if you have a YouTube channel, I wouldn't say just put up a YouTube video. I'd say put up a YouTube video, tweet about it, and put a link on Facebook. So you're sort of getting a triple-pronged approach, as it were.
Do you advise these companies, or you help them, or what's your role in the sort of social media of these companies?
It very much depends on the charity. So we have a variety of charities come to us. Some very large national organisations, some very small organisations. So my main client doesn't have a staff member. They have a board of trustees and then me. So I do everything for that charity, strategy-wise, including their social media. Other charities we work with will have their own comms team or comms staff member. If that's the case, we obviously won't do as much hands-on, but we will advise probably more in a strategic way how they can fit their comms into their overall development.
And do you think that charities are more creative in the way that they use social media just because they have to be?
I think by nature charities are often more creative because of the staff members that you find in those organisations. If you look at some of the large corporates, though, a lot of them are becoming a lot more creative with the things that they're tweeting. PG Tips do it very well, as do Tango and Paddy Power. These are the kind of organisations that we say, have a look at what they're doing, and sort of you can try and use that as an example of best practice. But of course they can use paid promotions, which helps. So charities almost have to try and be more creative, more funny, more innovative in order to get the kind of viral effect that they're looking for.
And can you tell me, do they use social media in charities for anything specific, or are they using it for fundraising, for awareness?
Yeah, I mean, generally we're looking at raising awareness, and with raising awareness you would hope there'd be an increase in fundraising. I would argue that just putting out a tweet that says, please donate to us, here's the link, won't get a very good response at all. I think what you're actually looking for is, here's something funny, or here's something great we've done, find out more online, and then when they find out more online, perhaps included in that information is, you can donate here. That's the kind of engagement that you want, and at least you're getting a pull through a click through to your website. People will just scroll through, please give us money, because they're just so used to seeing it.
And do you think there are actual concrete figures that prove that since social media started, the charities have actually done better since social media sort of became more prominent?
Certainly there's a difference now between what would normally be sort of very local community charities and what reach they have now got to go more national. That is certainly true.
So, again, some very interesting tips and hints there and points. One of the things I would challenge, though, which I found interesting, is that Laura mentioned her company encourages her clients to outsource their strategy totally. And one of the things I'm always adamant about is that strategy is something you should own because it's part of your organisation. But maybe if I'd had a longer chat myself with her, specifically around strategy, I don't know, maybe I'd have got a different perspective. I think the other things, though, that were very useful that came out of that discussion, this concept again of knowing who your audience are, the younger audiences, the Facebook and YouTube might be appropriate, and she talked about older audiences looking at Twitter, and I think that's the startling statistic that the largest growth age group for Twitter is 55 plus. That was something I was really surprised to hear. I think the other thing about creativity being valuable and looking at those that do use social media really well. She mentioned PG Tips and Paddy Power as a couple. I think that was valuable too. And then this idea of themes, something funny and interesting with a link to your website, which is something that's really come out of the other interviews too. Vicky, what did you think?
Well, I think everything she said was absolutely bang on. I take your point about the strategy, but my guess is that they've got strategy in the house, and what she's doing is just the strategic element, which is the social networking. Because it doesn't sound as though in one of those instances there was any staff anyway to own anything if you've got trustees. But I think this sort of concept about pulling it all together, making sure that you're using the right channels for your audience is very, very important. I don't think it's as cut and dried as those are younger and those are older anymore. I think you've got to be very much cleverer in your targeting than that. And you've got to really understand how it is that people are potentially going to engage with your Twitter account or your Facebook page, and what you're going to be giving them. I did a local, I did the we had the Harpenden 10K for cancer the other weekend. And, they encourage you to go on the site after you've done it, see the pictures of you looking very, very hot and wet and red and all the rest. Drowned rat, actually, it was. Find out what time you'd done, find out how other people are. All of those things that any runner is really interested in. Oh, and by the way, please give us some more money. It was very, very clever. It was subliminal. It was getting you there for the reasons that you selfishly want to be there. And by the way, reminding you that it was a charity. So I think lots and lots of valuable information there.
Excellent. Cheryl?
I thought it was really fascinating how she was sort of talking about how charities were using social media, because it's such a great tool for kind of getting a story out there. And I think with charities, that's so important to kind of engage people and to sort of tell that story, because that sort of pulling at the heartstrings is the sort of thing that's going to get them donations at the end of the day. So I think it must be a really powerful tool for charities.
Excellent. Right. Okay. We've just got time for one more clip. Now, turning activity into action is the real challenge in all of this. And one of the questions or problems most often raised is how much time should one spend on this sort of thing, and what are the ROIs? Well, there were no quick answers to this, but Sarah Coften, who we spoke to, had quite a lot to say regarding those in important calls to action and objectives for lots of all this digital marketing. So let's hear from her now.
My name's Sarah Coften. I work for Smithfield Agency. We're a small media agency working across all media above the line, below the line and digital. I head up the digital side of things, and we specialise in making small budgets work harder and applying communication strategy and methodology that are expected of bigger brands to our smaller clients to get them results.
So say you have somebody who's maybe made a product, they're hoping to sell it at a similar price, say to the big stores or the big companies. If you're then taken to a not terribly good website, Would you say that's a mistake, and that actually you should make sure everything, you're on a par, if you like, with all the other big companies?
Yeah, I think even if you don't have a very sophisticated site with lots of pages, the look and feel of it has got to appeal and meet the expectations of the user. If people are disappointed because of the way your website looks, then immediately that's a turn-off, and you'd have to work 10 times, 100 times faster to acquire them back to your site again. Even if you have a simple WordPress site that's only a few pages and it's very transactional, it needs to have the right look and feel.
And if you were giving advice, say, to a smaller business, and maybe they had set aside some money for marketing, for advertising, where would be the first place you would suggest they go to?
It really depends on the objectives. A lot of people start with search and cost per click advertising, such as Google AdWords, but this is only meeting the demand that's already in the market. It's not stimulating any demand, so there needs to be a level of awareness from an entrepreneur that they need to stimulate demand and bring people to their website. So Facebook is a good place to start because you only need images such as JPEGs, GIFs of your products, and therefore it can be cost effective, and you can reach people who might already know about you if you've got a physical presence such as a high street shop. So Facebook is a good place to start.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you,
you can find us at smithfieldagency.co.uk. Our contact details are there. We're based in Covent Garden. We're happy to meet people and listen to anyone's inquiries.
Cheryl, that was quite interesting, actually. I mean, she was describing Facebook as being cost effective. Is that how you see it as well?
Well, it depends how you use Facebook. Obviously, these days there's a lot of things you can do on Facebook which do cost, which cost money. If you were to just use the sort of free options on Facebook, but you use them very, very well, you manage to get a wide audience engaging with you, then definitely it's a very cost-effective option, I think.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of the show. I think really, I mean, just quickly, I mean, do you think that we've what do you think we've learnt, Vicky? I'll just pick on you actually to actually say.
We've learnt loads.
Yeah.
I think there's an awful lot to learn out there. Don't be frightened. Get out there. Start understanding it better. Start playing with it, and start trying to really understand how it can help your business, how you can find the right sorts of potential customers, and start engaging with them in all sorts of different ways.
Okay, that's brilliant. I think that's a perfect summary. All that remains is for us to say thank you to Cheryl Luzet from Wagada, and to Vicky Scott, Clare McAnulty and Roma Bhowmick, and also from me, Trevor Merriden. Thank you ever so much for listening. We're on every Sunday, so do tune in again for our next issue. Until then, good night.
Business on Radio Verulam. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.